Hi guys, how are you doing today? I hope you're all doing very well. I am wearing this. Okay, so in my last video, I was wearing this slip gown, and this is actually the same one, but it's like a different color variant. So the other one was like a maroon burgundy color, and it had like pink lace at the top, and this one is like a pale pink. I don't know if it's showing up as pink or maybe it's white or something, but it's like a pale pink, and then it's got like this like fuchsia detail, lace detail. By the way, I've been meaning to say this. So I get a lot of comments of people saying like, "Oh, like I love it when you talk about like what you're wearing in the beginning of the video, blah blah blah." But then once in a while I do get comments that are like, "Why are you doing that?" So I just want to ask like, is that something, cuz like obviously I talk about a lot of like heavy stuff on this channel, so like I keep doing that because it's something that you guys say you really enjoy, but like I don't know if it's actually appropriate. So let me know in the comments if that's something that's like maybe you shouldn't do that anymore. Like I said, I do it because like you guys say you like it so much, but like I don't want to come off as insensitive. I kind of just feel like if I like take a few seconds to talk about whatever I'm wearing that day, it's like not a big deal, but I don't know. Let me know because I've been kind of thinking about that a little bit and I'm like, but whatever. So, like with my last video in part one of this series, we talked about Melanie Martinez, we talked about her rise to fame a little bit, and we talked about the Crybaby album pretty in depth. We did like a whole album analysis, and I gave my opinions, and we talked about the coloring book and some of the other stuff from the Crybaby era. So, this video is going to be focusing on the K through 12 era, which, by the way, I said K-12 a lot, and a lot of, well, not a lot of people, but people are like, it's K through 12. I know it's K through 12, but K-12 is just easier to say, so I'm gonna say that for most of the video. So we're gonna focus on K-12. It's gonna be the same thing. We're gonna be analyzing the entire album and, well, actually the film, because we're gonna be focusing on the K-12 film today, which is the album, but I'll get to that in a sec. So before we just jump right in, content warnings, right? So like with last time, there's gonna be themes of things such as SA, we're even going to be touching on EDs a little bit today. There's also going to be like some brief mentions of things like racism and transphobia. What else is there? I want to make sure I cover all my bases. Oh, there is, okay, so like there's going to be very, very, very brief mentions of animal as well. Unfortunately, that won't be till a little later in the end. And there's also going to be, like I said, there's going to be a lot of themes of like SA, but they're basically in this video, we're going to be talking about Melanie's friend, Elita, who I briefly mentioned in my last video and said I would talk about more in this video. And there's a lot there. There's a lot there. So honestly, content warnings for like everything. Content warnings for everything. Ever. Cool. All right. Just keep that in mind. And lastly, so I had mentioned this in my last video as well, we're going to really focus on the visually artistic aspect of this film. And I had mentioned in my last video two artists that Melanie has stated that she is greatly inspired by. And I said I would be talking about a lot of the art more in depth in this video, which we will be, and I'll touch on that a little bit more soon. So K through 12 is Melanie's second studio album, which was also adapted into a film. The album and film were released on September 6, 2019, 4 years after the Crybaby album. And by the way, I don't know if you guys know this, but Melanie actually has a pattern of coming out with new albums, like full-length albums, every 4 years. So even like Portals was released in 2023, 4 years after K-12. And she did state that she won't be releasing any new music for another 4 years following Portals. So just a fun fact if you didn't know that. So K through 12 continues the story of Crybaby, following our main character, Crybaby, as she begins school. And the timeline picks up to Crybaby entering first grade. The way this film works is that it compiles all of the music videos in chronological order, and there are scenes in between each of the music videos that follow the story, which creates a film essentially. It honestly feels a lot like a musical. It's very interesting. Melanie stated in an interview that they were shooting for 31 days straight at the Esterházy Palace, hopefully I said that right, in Hungary, which was built in 1784 and has 126 rooms. And this album and film explores similar themes to Crybaby, but also very different themes as well. Since this all takes place in a school, a lot of the themes follow that, sort of challenges children often face at school, ranging from bullying to crushes to jealousy to insecurity, etc. But this film is also stated to explore deeper themes of things like transphobia, racism, female empowerment, power imbalances, how boys and men predate on young girls, including a student teacher relationship, as Melanie put it, and this even touches on the topic of EDs as well. It's kind of a coming of age story, but also simultaneously a fantasy horror story, and also contains like deeper messages related to society and politics and feminism and things of that nature. So before we dive into this album and this film, let's set the stage by talking about some of the artistic inspiration and just the artistry in general with this film. So, one of the things that Melanie prides herself on is her artistic abilities. And being that she is a writer, a musician, painter, filmmaker, photographer, like I said in part one, she's really the definition of a true artist all around. And one of the big things that Melanie is praised for regarding this film is just how visually beautiful it is. Obviously, it takes place in a very beautiful historic palace in Hungary. It maintains that very bright pastel vintage aesthetic, like in Crybaby. It even has this filter that gives this very like soft pink hue to everything, and it almost has this like angelic glow to it. The costume and hair designs are also very striking and have a lot of those same vintage pastel elements, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the costumes specifically a bit further into this because the costumes are often described as Lolita, and so I'm going to briefly educate everyone on Lolita fashion subculture and why I think this is not Lolita, but I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'll expand upon that more later. So, with the film being so visually attractive and decorative and artistic, in a lot of Melanie's interviews, she's often asked who her artistic inspirations are. Melanie has often said that she is heavily inspired by Tim Burton and Alice in Wonderland, even Dr. Seuss, and she's also stated she's very into pop surrealism, and her biggest inspirations are two artists, Mark Ryden and Nicoletta Ceccoli. Now, I don't know if I said that right, but I did have trouble with that in my last video, and I watched some more Melanie interviews, and Melanie says Nicoletta Ceccoli, so I'm gonna take her word for it and assume she's right. If I'm not, oh well, sorry.
Obviously a certain aesthetic that you've done, you're directing films now and things. So you obviously that's a gift for you, and you use a lot of imagery in your lyrics. So there's it's an emotion. Obviously, it's emotional. It's a song, but at the same time, it's not always just how I feel. You're using a lot of images to do that. So
Mhm.
how much of that comes from film, but I'm also curious. Do you read a lot? If so, are there certain things that have kind of like been inspiration for you and focused your lyric writing even more?
Um, well, I think that everything collectively that I have, liked, listened to, or, um, even seen in just passing in my life, like has influenced me in some way, shape, or form, whether it was subconscious or not. But I think visually, like I could think, I think I could name my biggest visual influences probably like Mark Ryden's artwork and like Nicoletta Ceccoli. Those are like my two favorite just artists, visual artists.
So, both of them make surrealist art very fantasy and dreamlike, often blending bright pastel colors with muted, dull colors as well. And they both often depict very sort of childlike figures and characters in their paintings. And while these paintings often are very bright and colorful, they also are sometimes very dark and nightmarish. There will often be things like gore, creatures, monsters, bugs, blood, knives, but also things like candy, flowers, cake, stuffed animals, ball gowns, vintage toys, dolls. So, like Melanie stated with Crybaby, this art blends childlike figures and items and themes and stories with dark adult themes. And also, like with Crybaby, a lot of this art is also suggestive. Some I'd say is very suggestive, even. So, Mark Ryden has a few paintings that are kind of like iffy, mainly because in some of those paintings the subject is completely nude, which, like, okay, whatever, that's fine, obviously. And the thing is, though, on the surface, some of those subjects do kind of resemble children or young girls, though I can't really verify if those subjects are supposed to be children or not. It's like definitely a more gray area. But I would say Nicoletta has a lot more of these suggestive themes within her work. In fact, a good majority of it is suggestive, whereas I'd say some of Ryden's could potentially be, but like I said, I can't really verify if those subjects are supposed to be children or not. They kind of look like children, I'll be honest, they sort of resemble children, but I don't know. With Nicoletta, however, it's abundantly clear that she is depicting kids, specifically young girls. So, when Melanie had stated that these were her two primary inspirations, I decided to study the works of both of these artists and go through the K-12 film and see if I could detect some scenes and shots that may be Melanie's own interpretations of these things and inspirations. And I detected many things that are very much reminiscent of both the artist's paintings, but especially Nicoletta's. Now, I said in my previous video that I was not going to show any of these images because of the very suggestive nature of them and the fact that they involve child characters and figures. Although they may not be explicit in nature necessarily, for the most part, keyword most. So I have decided for the purpose of this video that I'm going to show just a select few of these paintings. The only ones that I'm going to show are the ones that I think inspired some of the scenes and illustrations for K-12. I contemplated for a while if this was a good idea or not, and have ultimately decided to do this because I really want you all to kind of see what I see and make some of these connections yourselves. Because I don't think you guys really understand how truly deep and dark this rabbit hole is. There are still many very skeptical people who believe that what Melanie is doing is not predatory and that she's not raising children or living out a twisted fantasy, and that all of the baby stuff mixed with adult themes is just for aesthetic purposes and not for those more nefarious reasons. I believe I have a very strong case to prove that it is the latter. And this artwork is a huge aspect of my case. I think once you guys see a lot of the artistic inspiration for these scenes, it will paint that picture much more clearly. No pun intended. Because once you see it and once you connect those dots, you can't unsee it. You can't. When I started to study the works of these two artists and compared it side by side with the K-12 film and even certain scenes of Crybaby as well, it was a game changer. It really was. Suddenly I went from being pretty confident in my opinions of this all being a twisted fantasy to being 100% sure and 100% certain of my opinions. And I truly believe once you all see that, you will feel the exact same way as well. Now, look, when you see some of these things side by side, not every single example is a complete replication of whatever art I'm comparing it to. Some are a lot more obvious than others. So while I will show ones that are quite similar, other ones you may think, yeah, there are some similarities, but they don't look exactly alike. They could be inspired, but they could not be. I know not all of these are like exact replicas, okay? That's not where I'm trying to go with this. I'm not saying all of these are one-to-one. Some of these are very much, oh yeah, she was definitely inspired by this, and others are, I can see visual similarities here, but they don't look exactly the same. I've studied both these artists and this film pretty extensively. I've had to rewatch it many times. So just because I see certain similarities doesn't necessarily mean you will. Art is subjective, and I am an artist myself, so I'm looking at all of this both through my perspective as an artist as well as all my research. And since Melanie stated that these are her two main artistic inspirations specifically for K through 12, I am just working within that to see what connections I can make to certain works and certain concepts, because I think it really demonstrates the true intention behind Crybaby and K through 12. And my point, my big point that I keep driving home, that this is a way to live out a twisted fantasy and not for aesthetic purposes or anything like that. Just because I see it doesn't necessarily mean you will, but I'm politely asking you to just humor me. Just humor me, okay? Just humor me and keep an open mind. And just remember that Melanie herself, has cited both of these people as her biggest inspirations artistically. And like I said, I think once you see some of the inspiration for this material, it's going to ring a bell that can't be unrung, and you will make those connections on your own. And aside from that, I also think that exploring some of the art and making these comparisons will also just make the video more interesting and thought-provoking. At the end of the day, while this is educational, it's also content and it's also entertainment, and it's meant to be entertaining, right? So then once we've gone through the whole album and I start to give my opinions, I am then going to not show, but describe some of the more deeply suggestive and inappropriate works from these artists. Again, primarily Nicoletta, because Mark doesn't have nearly as many controversial works, and I can't really verify if he's even depicting kids or not, unfortunately. And that way you will all have an overall very well-rounded understanding of the art and the inspiration behind Melanie's work. And like I said, and like I've said many times already, be able to make those connections yourself and see this stuff for what it truly is. So yeah, I know that was like a really big preface, but I just feel that context is pretty important to have in mind when we go through and examine this. So let's dive into K-12. So we begin with our main character, Crybaby, waking up out of bed as her alarm goes off, and we can hear Crybaby's inner dialogue, of course, being narrated by Melanie. She's recalling a dream she had, and she mentions how she saw cardboard cutouts dancing all around her, which I think is obviously referencing Mad Hatter, since that's where the Crybaby album left off. I could be wrong about that. She circles the date on her calendar, and we see it's her first day of school. She starts to get ready for school, and she notes how her mom can't drive her to the bus stop because she is passed out, which, if you recall from part 1, Crybaby's mother is an alcoholic. Then we see Crybaby leave, and it then cuts to her on the school bus with her friend, Elita, who is named Angelita in the film. While Crybaby and Angelita sit together, very reserved, very shy, chaos is ensuing around them with the other students. The school bus is bright pink, by the way, and I'm obsessed with that. Anyways, one of the other students passes a note to Crybaby and Angelita, and the note says, "Gap tooth bitch," obviously making fun of Crybaby's teeth. So it's clear already that Crybaby does not fit in and is the target of bullying by her classmates. One girl in particular makes a sly remark asking if Crybaby needs some tissues, and we'll soon find out this girl is named Kelly and is the popular girl / alpha in the film. All of the kids begin teasing Crybaby, and she starts to cry, and then our first track begins, Wheels on the Bus. So this song highlights some of the dysfunction on the school bus and with the class in general. Kids are putting their hands up each other's clothes, smoking weed. One kid pulls his pants down and flashes his bare bottom in one of the school bus windows. Honestly, this whole thing kind of reminds me of like when I was in high school and my friends and I would we would sneak to like the very back of the school bus and like hit our jewels and try not to get caught. We'd have you ever done that before? Where you're like in a public place, like a school or a bus, and you like can't vape, so you like hit it and then you like hold it in and you just like slowly let it out so that it like disappears, and you like, my friends and I would just like do it, and we would try our best not to like cough and whatever. I don't even know why I'm talking about this. This whole school thing is like just reminding me of like when I was in school. Even the bus driver is trying to smoke and seems to turn a blind eye to everything happening. According to Melanie, this song is meant to call out the way our society turns a blind eye towards troubled teens. Which makes sense, but as we'll soon see, the kids at this point in time are not teens, but instead first graders. Like with part one, I am going to hold my opinions until after the album analysis, but just keep in mind, these are not troubled teens. These are troubled first graders, meaning they are about 6 to 7 years old. And some notable lyrics. I'm just looking outside the window and it's cold outside. There are two boys yelling behind me and I'm terrified, counting trees as they pass me by, and I'm trying not to look across the aisle because Maya's letting Dan put his hand up her skirt and she's got her hand down his pants. I know the driver sees it. I know he's peeking in the rearview mirror. He says nothing. Try to ignore it. It's boring. I'm quietly observing. I'm saying nothing. As the first track is ending, we then go to one final bus stop, where a certain boy enters the bus. Now, I had to do a complete double take when I first saw this, because immediately when I saw this dude's face, I genuinely thought it was Liam Payne from One Direction. Like, tell me he does not look exactly like Liam Payne. Which would have been absolutely hilarious, but sadly, of course, it was not Liam Payne. Rest in peace, Liam. Anyways, the boy makes hard eye contact with Crybaby and she begins to approach him. But unfortunately, he ends up pushing Crybaby out of the way to go sit with Kelly, the popular girl. Side note, I did read a fan theory that Kelly might be Basic Bitch from Pacify Her, mainly because they are both blonde and both of them are like the embodiment of the popular girl archetype, and also because in the Crybaby coloring book illustration, Basic Bitch wears a pink dress, very similar to the one Kelly is wearing now. So just food for thought. Then, suddenly, the bus driver stops paying attention, which causes the bus to swerve and eventually fall off a cliff into the sea. As the bus is sinking, Crybaby and Angelita use their supernatural powers to lift the bus out of the water and save the class. In the Crybaby album, we slowly see Crybaby develop sort of supernatural abilities throughout the story, and you may have missed it, but actually in Alita's first appearance in the Tag Your It music video, we can see that she also possesses these supernatural abilities. And when they tap into these abilities, their eyes turn pitch black. We saw it happen in Mad Hatter as well, and even in the Crybaby music video, from the nurse who gave Crybaby to her mom, who also possessed these abilities. FYI, we don't really know or find out where these powers come from or why they have them. We just know that they do, and they utilize them throughout the rest of the film, so just keep that in mind. The students then arrive at the K-12 sleepaway school. As Crybaby and Angelita exit the bus, we see the bus driver sneaking a peek at the girls as they bend over, which reveal their underwear that says off. The girls enter the school, and at one point we see a ghost. This is the first sense we get that something about this school is very wrong. The girls then find their class, which is the first grade class. Side note, I did see a lot of people say that the album has 13 songs, so they attribute each song to a new grade, and the 13 songs end up spanning from first grade to 12th grade. I almost said to 8th grade. Can't find anything to verify this, but it would actually make a lot of sense if this was the case, so I will keep this in mind throughout the film, although I should note that all of Melanie's albums have 13 tracks, so it could have nothing to do with the grade progression and instead just be following that pattern. As the two girls are entering their class, they get scolded by the teacher for arriving late. And this teacher is a cokehead, by the way. The loudspeakers then state that all students need to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. One student, Henry, does not stand. The teacher demands that he stand, but he refuses. He then makes the remark, "Liberty and justice for all, that's bullshit." As a result, Henry is forcibly removed from the class by 2 officers or security guards. I'm not sure what that's about. Clearly, there is some corruption at this school, and the staff do not treat the children well, and this will become more obvious as we progress. So then we transition to the second track, Class Fight. Basically, Kelly is trying to get the attention of fake Liam Payne or whatever, but he's instead giving Crybaby attention. Of course, this upsets Kelly, and she passes a note to Crybaby implying she's going to kill her at recess. The song then stops briefly for a scene during nap time, where Angelita and Crybaby sneak to some blanket kind of fort, and Crybaby shows Angelita the note Kelly threw at her. Angelita tells Crybaby she has to defend herself with her supernatural abilities, and Crybaby hesitates, saying she feels as though she has an unfair advantage and it would be cheating. We then see Kelly put a snake into Crybaby's sleeping bag, which doesn't seem to bother Crybaby. Then we cut to recess, and Liam, the love interest, I'm just gonna call him Liam because I can't think of his name right now, starts talking to Crybaby, and when Kelly notices, she attacks Crybaby. The fight ensues. It gets pretty gnarly. Kelly even cuts her at one point with a knife. Crybaby snaps and uses her abilities to levitate. Her and both Kelly kind of rise into the air above the class, and Crybaby then uses her braids to choke Kelly. The teacher then notices after hitting a line and runs outside to break up the fight. So then the students get scolded by the teacher, and then we cut to another scene. In this scene, we get introduced to the principal of the school. The principal is having a conversation with a teacher who states she is transitioning and would like to be referred to by she, her pronouns. She insists that the students really connect with her, and she'd like to keep her job, but in order to do so, she needs to be able to live as her authentic self, aka a woman. The principal fires her. And that's literally all we get from that scene. As the kids are sitting and waiting to be reprimanded, I guess, another kid takes a pill. Crybaby asks what the pills are, and he says they force him to take the pills, with each one being a different dose. Another kid is eating glue, also, by the way, which Kelly yells at him to stop. When Crybaby asks why he is forced to take the medication, the student says to control us so that we can't leave. Crybaby then uses her supernatural abilities to peek into the principal's office where she can see the interaction taking place between the principal and the teacher. Crybaby then calls the principal on the phone, and as he picks up, she begins singing, and that's where our third track begins, The Principal. In the music video, Crybaby and a few other students are performing in front of a set of judges. They're all wearing these Victorian-style outfits, and the judges have that, founding father sort of look. I don't really know how else to describe it. Melanie stated that this song is actually a reference to Donald Trump, and that he terrifies her. And at a 2016 concert, she stated after his election, "I'm very sad today because Donald Trump became president. I'm very, very, very upset." At the end of the music video, we see the principal drink something and then pass out. It seems as though he was poisoned. He is then giving a shot. I'm guessing it's meant to be an antidote for the poison. We see his eyes open, but we then transition back to the classroom. And some notable lyrics: sneaky, greedy, money-seeking, always peeping, creeping, got it on the down low. So you think you always squeaky. What if I had told your mother her son was a cruel mother? It's not just me, it's everybody who thinks that you're ugly. When you come and hurt us just so you can get your money, forced to follow the leader who's possessed by demons. This is one of my favorite songs off the album, mainly because it's very catchy, but also because of the costume design. And speaking of which, let's do a quick side quest and talk a little bit about Lolita Fashion subculture. So a lot of videos that I have seen made about Melanie have pointed out how Melanie tends to dress very childlike, and they often use the term Lolita to describe the fashion style. And it's definitely understandable why, because on the surface, a lot of the costumes, especially in K-12, are very much reminiscent of Lolita fashion. However, while on the surface it may look like Lolita, it actually isn't all that much. And also, Lolita fashion subculture is a very niche community with its own history and set of values. So I'd like to educate everyone a little bit on Lolita fashion subculture and explain why what Melanie is doing is not that. So, Lolita, in the context of fashion, is a fashion subculture that derives its inspiration from vintage Victorian dolls. Now, the term Lolita does originate from the 1955 novel of the same name, which is a story about a young 12-year-old girl named Dolores who is lusted after and predated upon by a much older man who moves into the apartment complex where the young girl lives with her mother. However, despite the shared name, there actually really isn't a correlation between the novel and the fashion subculture. So, why that name was chosen is beyond me. But regardless, there is no connection between the subculture and the novel other than the shared name. This subculture began in the 1980s in Japan as a response to the rigid gender norms and was almost like a form of rebellion. To quote an article from Grinnell College, starting in the 1980s and 90s, rather than dealing with the difficult reality of rapid commercialization, destabilization of society, a rigid social system, and an increasingly body-focused fashion norm, a select group of youth chose to find comfort in the over-the-top imaginary world of lace, frills, bows, tulle, and ribbons. While the Victorian doll royalty aesthetic originated in Europe, it gained widespread popularity in Japan alongside the kawaii fashion craze and even the later visual kei fashion that was inspired by visual kei rock bands gaining popularity. And even within Lolita fashion subculture, there are many variations, including classic Lolita, sweet Lolita, gothic Lolita, and even grotesque Lolita, which was very new to me, but is very appealing despite the misleading name. It very much reminds me of like the whole creepy cute aesthetic that was really popular in the 2010s here in Western society. Something very important about this, and I'm going to steal a quote from this article again. By promoting demure mannerisms and sweet femininity without the traditional passivity ascribed to civilized women, this style offers participants resistance against conventional cultural pressures and happiness via an escape into fantasy. So, something that you notice across all variations of Lolita subculture is that while it does have that very visually Victorian vintage baby doll aesthetic, it is in no way provocative nor suggestive or revealing. The fashion is both very modest and classy, very well put together, and heavily accessorized and embellished. Things like jewelry, tights, arm sleeves, gloves, hats, bows, and umbrellas often accompany ball gown style dresses that are usually knee length or longer. But it goes much farther beyond the fashion and visual presentation. Lolita also emphasizes things like being reserved, well-mannered, dignified, classy and demure, ladylike. It's much more than just the fashion. It's about escapism and individuality. There's even specialized speech that is more ladylike that is often used in these spaces by Japanese-speaking Lolita enthusiasts and participants. Now, you'd think that because of the aesthetic that this style would be practiced more by children, but actually it's the opposite. Lolitas are generally adults, usually under the age of 40, but adults nonetheless. This is because, like I stated earlier, Lolita is all about escape, rebellion, forgetting traditional expectations and adult responsibilities, letting go into a world of fantasy and royalty and cuteness. And I want to share another quote from this article. The connection between youth and sexuality, although not the goal of Lolitas, is still a common commodification by male consumers of Japanese pop culture depicting hybridized Lolita aesthetics. This has led to controversy around Lolita as a possible fuel for pedophilia and the objectification of females. However, with proper representation, Lolitas are, despite being sweet and demure, against the objectification and sexual submission of females. Instead, feminine strength in the form of self-control and proper conduct is ideal for the fantasized lady. There is nothing inherently sexual about Lolita subculture. Let me say it again. There is nothing inherently sexual about Lolita subculture. But men have objectified and commodified it in a way to appeal more to the male gaze. So I think that's why people often get confused and misled by the word Lolita in the context of fashion specifically. So with all that in mind, let me explain how what Melanie is doing is not Lolita. So, number one, the dresses chosen in K-12 are far too short. Lolita dresses are typically no shorter than knee length and are often much longer than that. Additionally, in K through 12, these dresses are not accessorized at all. There's no arm sleeves, no collars, no jewelry, hats, etc., which are all staples of a typical traditional Lolita presentation, or court as many people call it. Even the material of the dresses in K-12, you can just tell are very cheap and costume-like. Whereas with Lolita, it's very high quality fabrics, and Lolitas really reject fast fashion, like with other subcultures, such as goth subculture. Now, aside from the visual differences, K-12 also lacks those demure, well-mannered, ladylike behaviors and demeanor expected in traditional Lolita. The girls constantly curse, their dresses fly up, they behave very sexually, all things not associated with traditional Lolita. So while the K-12 fashion may definitely be Lolita inspired, it is in fact quite different. And there are some scenes later on that are definitely more Victorian royalty ball gown inspired, but still not quite Lolita. I just wanted to take a few minutes to distinguish that because Lolita tends to have a very negative connotation, especially with people like Melanie Martinez commercializing it to appeal more to that commodified male gaze Lolita image. But there's actually nothing wrong nor inappropriate about Lolita fashion. So I just don't want anyone to see someone out and about in full Lolita and get the wrong idea and think that they're like trying to dress like a child or associate it with Melanie Martinez. Because from what I've gathered, if you show up to the convention looking like Melanie Martinez in K-12, you're definitely going to get some side eyes. This is not an accurate portrayal of Lolita fashion subculture, and there's nothing inherently sexual or inappropriate about Lolita. Anyways, back to the main story. So Crybaby again enters the classroom late. And immediately we transition to the fourth track, Show and Tell. Show and Tell is a song Melanie wrote about the struggles of being a public figure and being put into the spotlight. In the music video, Crybaby is a puppet dancing for the class. She's doing these butt slaps and air humping sort of, and the students are cheering her on, and it's clear they're meant to symbolize Melanie's fan base. This video reminded me a lot of these two paintings from Nicoletta, especially this one with the girl in the blue dress with the puppet dancing between her legs. Obviously, while the scenes in the paintings are similar, they aren't exact replicas. Although, if you look closely at the box that Crybaby's puppet is dancing in, the curtains around her are blue. Exactly like the girl's blue dress in the painting. Just an interesting similarity I couldn't help but notice. And same with the doll, they aren't exactly the same, but it is pretty similar, and it really reminded me of that one line in the chorus, buy and sell like I'm a product to society. At the end of the video, we see the doll on the floor, broken and bloody, and the kids sneer at it and call it gross and walk away, which I think is meant to symbolize the way we build up celebrities only to break them down and discard them like they're literally a product to society. Some notable lyrics: show and tell, show and tell. I'm on display for all you f***ers to see. Show and tell, show and tell. Harsh words if you don't get a pic with me. Buy and sell, like I'm a product to society. Art don't sell unless you f*** every authority. Then we cut to see Angelita sitting with a couple other students who are coughing and sneezing, and we can kind of infer that they're waiting for the school nurse. Crybaby, using her supernatural abilities, appears. The two girls are then taken by a set of nurses to a random ballroom where the fifth track, Nurse's Office, begins. This entire song and video revolves around the theme of the nurse's office, and Melanie actually stated this was her favorite song off of the album. She even incorporates specific sounds in the song, such as coughing and band-aid rips, which I thought was really cool. This song is a reference to being bullied and how the only safe space Crybaby can retreat to is the nurse's office, where she often fakes being sick so that she can be excused and sent home, which Melanie stated she did often as a child, which I think many of us can honestly relate to. I mean, how many of us pretended we had a stomach ache because we wanted to get out of school, right? Whether it was because of bullying or because we missed an assignment or even trying to get out of a class presentation, which I did that one a lot as a kid. In this video, the nurses begin doing this dance routine, and Crybaby and Angelita are strapped to these gurneys, or I think that's what they're called, I'm not sure. The nurses eventually force them to take drugs. One nurse injects Angelita with the drug, and Crybaby is forced to drink a drug substance. The girls sort of trip and eventually saved by some person who seems to also be a spirit of some sort. It's really out of nowhere and we don't get any context. So I don't even know honestly what this is, but they make another appearance later on. The girls ask the spirit to take them away, and the spirit tells them they have to carry on. That's where the song ends. This whole video, as well as the cover for the song and even the lyric video illustration, reminded me a lot of these paintings from Nicoletta and Ryden. I personally think this is one of the more obviously inspired scenes. There's quite a few similarities between the paintings and all of the imagery. In one interview, Melanie mentions that this song specifically was her favorite and that it came very naturally to her and was much more intuitive than some of her other songs. She also described it as a blur and an out-of-body experience and was one of the most significant experiences for her and for this album. And some notable lyrics: "Don't cut me, punch me, just let me go. Into the nurse's office where I float away. I'm pale as the loose leaf paper they grow, from hollowing out all my lungs in the snow. Yeah, I'm coughing, I'm bleeding, band-aids won't heal it, 'cause they hate me so I'm faking all of this so they take me, take me." After the video ends and Crybaby and Angelita escape, the two girls leave and they hear music coming from a certain room. They open the door to a ballroom where many people are dancing. However, it turns out that these are ghosts who notice the two girls and try to attack them. Luckily, they escape, and this is kind of foreshadowing for the ending of the film. After that, Crybaby goes back to class, which is taking place in an auditorium. Crybaby is once again scolded for being late. Based on some of the surrounding conversation, it seems that this is a drama class. They are discussing each person's role, and when Crybaby asks if she can take on a different role, such as a director or the president, or something less domestic, as she puts it, the teacher then suggests she be a harlot, basically insinuating her role as a woman is to fill a domestic role. One student even turns back to her to tell her she is too sensitive to play a man's role, and Crybaby tells him that a woman's ability to feel deeply and be in touch with their emotions is what makes women superior to men. I think this is obviously referencing some of the traditional societal expectations of women under the patriarchy and sort of trying to challenge that. And this is when the 6-track Drama Club begins. In this music video, we see Crybaby performing for the class with some other students, again in these very Victorian ball gown style outfits. This is another scene where I saw a lot of similarities to this one Ryden painting called The Parlor. Again, they're not replicas, but being the stage setting and the Victorian ball gown outfits, I just thought they were very remarkably similar. At one point in the music video, Crybaby burns one of the guys' faces with a clothing iron, which I kind of thought was sort of funny. Crybaby attempts to wake some of the other students out of a trance, which they're in a trance and I don't really know why, but using her powers, she's able to break them out of it and the students escape the class. And they all burst into the principal's office and literally murder the principal, ripping all of his limbs apart. This song, according to Melanie, references her Crybaby album, more specifically her being so emotional and sensitive. And some notable lyrics: Everyone's so soft, everyone's so sensitive. Do I offend you? You're hanging on my sentences. You can keep your costume and you can keep your mask. I'll take a bow so you can kiss my ass. They try to feed you lines that you have to memorize. You always hide behind your Wizard of Oz disguise. Do you even have a brain? You're sticking to a page. You're faking all your pain. Yeah, you're bleeding on a stage. And by the way, remember that Wizard of Oz line, okay? Remember it, because when I give my opinions on this album later on, I'm going to bring that up in a very different way. Which I'm sure you're probably thinking, like, what the hell does the Wizard of Oz have to do with any of this? But just trust me, you'll see. We then cut to Crybaby and Angelita digging a grave, which we find out they are burying the principal. Afterwards, we see Crybaby, Angelita, and another girl sitting on a tennis court where they have a conversation about how many holes they have. Holes obviously referencing genitalia. Now, if we think about this in terms of each track being a new grade, the girls would be in 6th grade right now, so about 11 to 12 years old. I would think by that point you would know how many holes you have. But if we think of it in terms of them still being in 1st grade, they'd be 6 or 7. So that would make a lot more sense. Who really knows? I mean, we can only theorize on that, but I will say this feels very out of place with the rest of the film. And keep in mind, this film aired in theaters, meaning parents took their kids to see this film. So just keep that in mind too as we go through this, that parents literally took their children in mass quantities to see this film in theaters. Their tennis ball then floats away on its own in a bubble, and this is also another piece of foreshadowing later on. In another thing, we see a boy writing in a journal while all of this is happening, which will come up again soon. We then cut to our 7th track, Strawberry Shortcake. This is a song about the objectification of women from men, and more specifically, how the bad actions of men are often blamed on women. It also discusses feelings of being uncomfortable with your body, especially during puberty. Whereas women, we often start to form breasts and grow hair in certain places, and all of the changes that come with that and how that can be awkward to deal with. The lyrics talk about things like dress codes and how modesty is pushed onto young women in order to not distract the boys, aka your shorts being too short or having too thin tank top straps, etc. This is exactly what Melanie had to say about the song in an alternative press interview. This song felt necessary to write for many reasons. I felt it was crucial to express the feeling of going through puberty and dealing with confusing dress codes that didn't exist a year before. I felt like I was becoming sexualized just because I was growing into a young woman. I always felt self-conscious because I was told to be modest and change how I dressed because of others' fear that boys would look at me, say something to me, or do something to me. I wanted to create a song that expressed what this conditioning does to girls, making us feel insecure and scared, and as if our body merely exists as an object instead of our sacred home. The music video begins in a school dressing room where we see girls dancing very provocatively, and we also see Crybaby as a cake, literally. She is topless as a cake, and the boys are gathered around her, ready to consume her. I think the symbolism there is quite transparent. There's also some scenes of Crybaby in a pool, and at the end of the music video, the boys cut into the cake and start to consume it. This scene very closely resembles one particular painting from Nicoletta, and I think it's pretty undeniable that Melanie derived some inspiration from this. If you look closely at this painting, you'll notice that the knife cutting the cake is being held by a pair of legs, and the frosting pouring out of her is red frosting. Are you kind of starting to see it a little bit? Like, are you starting to see what I see a little bit? I think that picture is kind of starting to paint itself. Now, if we consider the grade and track progression pattern theory, Crybaby would be in 7th grade at this point, so about 12 to 13 years old. So actually, this song would make quite a bit of sense in that context, as the majority of girls start to experience puberty in this age bracket. On the other hand, if this isn't the case and Crybaby is still in first grade, this is very odd. Some notable lyrics, and I'm going to read more of these ones. Feeling unsure of my naked body. Stand back, watch it taking shape. Wondering why I don't look like Barbie. They say boys like girls with a tiny waist. Now my mom is preaching to make sure I'm pure. Got boys acting like they ain't seen skin before. Got sent home to change 'cause my skirt is too short. It's my fault, 'cause I put icing on top. Now the boys want a taste of the strawberry shortcake. That's my bad. No one told them not to grab. Now the boys want a taste of the strawberry shortcake. Gotta make sure that my legs are shiny. Hot wax melting, burning my skin. People all around me are watching closely, 'cause it's how I look and not what I think. Mikey's eyes seem to be glued to her chest, so I'm stuffing my bra so that mine look the best. After the music video, we randomly cut to Crybaby in this sort of fantasy world that's almost reminiscent of the following album Portals. Not there yet. But she's talking to someone who we can't see, but I'm going to infer that perhaps it's that spirit girl we met in Nurse's office earlier. Crybaby is expressing feelings of sadness and wanting to die. And she's basically told by the spirit to carry on. Then we cut back to the school, where Crybaby, Angelita, and another girl are walking up the stairs. Angelita complains of having stomach pain, and then we see a red stain on her dress. Sure enough, Angelina gets her first period. This is another reason why I'm leaning towards the fan theory that each track is a new grade, because it's highly unlikely that Angelita would have gotten her period as a first grader, which I'm not saying is completely impossible. And in all fairness, there is a lot of fantasy and supernatural elements in this story, so I guess anything is really possible in this universe. But the vast majority of girls don't get their period that early. I got mine very early, but I was 10 years old at that time, not 6 or 7. Just from my experience growing up, most girls I knew got their periods in middle school or early high school, with of course some women getting theirs a little later. The girls run to the bathroom where the tampon machine is empty. The girls note that it's pretty messed up that they have to pay for tampons in the first place, and that they should be free. Angelita decides to use toilet paper instead, which I've been there, that's not fun at all. One of the school nurses enters the bathroom and tells the girls to go back to class. And as the girls exit, we see that Crybaby used her powers to steal a tampon from the nurse's pocket. Then, ironically, we see that the nurse gets her period, and she doesn't have a tampon, so she's kind of SOL. We then enter the cafeteria, and it's lunchtime. As Crybaby and her friends are getting their lunch, Kelly randomly runs to Crybaby, grabs her, and makes her sit at Kelly's lunch table, leaving Crybaby's friends behind. And this is where the 8th track begins, Lunchbox Friends. Lunchbox Friends is a song about fake friendships and being manipulated, and this is what Melanie told Alternative Press about the song. Moving through different friend groups is very common during our school years. I remember feeling discouraged about making genuine friends because I had experienced such shallow and mediocre friendships that seemed to only exist in the cafeteria during lunch. It made me realize how special it was that I had one best friend who was incredibly genuine and on the same page as me in life. I also realized how unnecessary it was to even desire a million best friends. Having one real and supportive best friend will always be more fulfilling than having a million fake ones, and that is what this song embodies. The lyric, "Come to my house, let's die together," is significant because dying is a metaphor for transformation and rebirth. The ability to heal and transform ourselves into better people side by side is the key to a lasting friendship. In this music video, Crybaby is dragged by Kelly to her lunch table with her friends, people who are later called plastic carbon copies by one of Crybaby's true friends. Most of this music video is just a dance performance in the cafeteria. When Crybaby finally returns to her real friends, she notices one of the carbon copy girls is peeling an orange, but not with her hands. Instead, she's using the same powers that Crybaby and Angelita possess. The girls then decide to start a food fight in order to discreetly grab the attention of the girl. The fight breaks out, and unfortunately, Kelly takes the girl and runs off to the bathroom. Crybaby follows, and to find that the girl is making herself regurgitate her food, with Kelly watching and smiling. This is the start of the 9th track, Orange Juice. As you can likely already tell, this is a song about struggling with an ED, as well as body image issues. More specifically, this is a song about bulimia. You turn oranges into orange juice. It's meant to symbolize the act of, I won't say specifically, but I'm sure you can all probably guess. Melanie explained the inspiration for this song to Alternative Press, saying, "Growing up and growing into my body, I've had many insecurities and doubts on my own beauty. It can be quite difficult to escape the immense pressure we all feel to fit into a certain mold of what our environment deems beautiful. When I was younger, I have a vivid memory of confiding with girls from my school about my insecurities and them suggesting to me that I should just do what they do and make myself grow up. I think it's become too normal for kids to think that they have to change the way they look in order to be valued or accepted." In the music video, we see the girl engaging in ED behaviors, comparing herself to models in magazines. We even see a scene where she is talking to what I think is a guidance counselor and her parents. At the same time this is happening, we also see more scenes of Melanie dancing, and her wig is a split-dyed orange and black. At the end of the video, we see Crybaby and the girl literally switch eyes, which I think is meant to represent seeing yourself how others see you, or saying, "I wish you could see yourself through my eyes." We then cut to see the girl and Kelly at the top of an orange tree, and we see Kelly putting oranges in her head, and as she is doing that, orange juice is coming out of her mouth. Crybaby saves the day by climbing the tree and using her powers to make Kelly disappear. Crybaby then gives the girl a pep talk about self-acceptance and tells her everyone is deserving of love. Some notable lyrics: "I wish I could give you my set of eyes, 'cause I know your eyes ain't workin'. I wish I could tell you that you're fine, so fine, but you will find that disconcerting." Meanwhile, the food fight is still happening in the cafeteria. It's complete chaos, and Angelita calls Crybaby and the other girl to join them as they hide from the food fight. Eventually, a random guy enters with his rabbit minions, and we find out that this is the principal's son. The son asks who started this, and Kelly tells him that bitch Crybaby behind the counter. As a result, Crybaby is dragged to detention, where she is strapped to her desk and injected with some kind of drug by the nurses from nurse's office. The other children are injected as well. Then we see Crybaby be put into a glass box with 3 other girls. She's being forced to dance in front of the class, very suggestively, I might add. This is the start of the 10th track, Detention. Detention is a song about, well, detention, but it has a deeper meaning as well. According to Melanie, she told Idolator, "I wrote this when I was on tour. It's about that feeling of being trapped. It's a weird thing to say, because I love performing, I really do. It's such a beautiful experience to connect with that many people in a room over music and art. It doesn't get much better than that. But there are moments as a human where it just feels really intense, and it feels like you're almost being put on a pedestal." Like I said, Crybaby is mostly just suggestively dancing in this video. We also see scenes where the principal's son is drinking in his office, or I guess technically his father's office. FYI, if we follow the track and grade progression theory, Crybaby would be in 10th grade right now. Eventually, at the end of the video, Crybaby uses her powers to manipulate the principal's son into releasing her, and she also breaks out of the glass box. Some notable lyrics: "The teachers don't care about me. F how I feel as long as I make money. They let them do whatever they want to me. They're the customer. I'm chopped meat. I'm chopped meat." Then we cut to see a boy putting a note in someone's locker. We'll soon see it was Crybaby's locker that the note was placed in, and the boy is the boy from earlier that we saw writing in the notebook. Crybaby reads the note, not knowing who it is from. It's a love poem, and before she can finish reading it, she is interrupted by one of her friends asking her, "Are you in?" when discussing their plan to overthrow the principal's son and all of the authority of the school and escape. Crybaby says she is in. Crybaby is told that her job is to manipulate the principal's son and hijack the loudspeaker so she can tell everyone to leave, and this will be important for later. Unfortunately for them, though, the principal's son is watching them through the security cameras and catches wind of their plan. We are now at the 11th track, Teacher's Pet. This is definitely probably the most controversial track and music video on the album/film. According to Melanie, this is a song about a student-teacher relationship in which the student, who is Angelita, gives her teacher sexual favors in exchange for good grades. And FYI, what is being described here is not a relationship. Relationships are a two-way interchange. They're a two-way exchange where both parties are consenting. An underage student cannot consent to a relationship with an adult. This is sexual abuse. So just felt like I needed to say that. In the music video, we see Angelita and her teacher making a lot of eye contact, and it's clear based on body language indicators that something is going on between her and the teacher. The teacher tells Angelita to stay after class, and when she does, her teacher gives her a lollipop that he secretly dipped in some kind of poison or drug. Angelita licks the lollipop, and once she does, her body shrinks. She is then mounted on some kind of tray, where her teacher giddily gets ready to begin dissecting her. But before he can, Crybaby's intuition kicks in, and she breaks into the nurse's office. She uses her powers to bring Angelita back to a normal physical state, and Angelita, in a furious rage, then stabs her teacher. This video reminded me a lot of these two paintings of Nicoletta's, mainly because of the way Angelita is sort of mounted/pinned the way butterfly specimens are mounted in a shadow box, and also because of the surrounding butterfly imagery in the film. Melanie said this about the song in an interview with Alternative Press, and I want you all to pay close attention to this. This is by far the creepiest song on the album, and I wanted it to sound scary to match how grotesque the subject matter is. I think media and society at large has always glamorized young girls being with much older men. I remember as a kid when a teacher would always get caught with a student, the news would always portray it as a teacher-student affair, instead of calling it what it is, which is abuse, and really just that teacher exerting the power of their age over a child. One of the most satisfying parts of the film is at the end of the song where Angelita is brought back to normal size again and starts twirling her knife around and goes for the kill. Just take note of this because when I give my opinions, I'm going to circle back to this quote. Some notable lyrics. Caught the teacher giving his eyes to a student. Pouty, pretty cute, and she bit her lip back to him. Chewing on her nails and her pens while she's dreaming of him. And he's fucking in sin. You know he is. Teacher's pet. If I'm so special, why am I secret? Yeah, why the is that? Do you regret the things we shared that I'll never forget? Well, do you? Tell me that. I know I'm young, but my mind is well beyond my years. I knew this wouldn't last, but you, don't you leave me here. Teacher's pet. If I'm so special, why am I secret? Angelita and Crybaby then go outside to smoke, and it immediately cuts to the next track, High School Sweethearts. This is actually my favorite song off of the album, though unfortunately, there are many issues with this song. Mainly, the fact that it's an incredibly sexually charged song about Melanie's desire for a serious relationship fueled by true love. Which would be fine if it wasn't told from the perspective of a high schooler. This music video only features Crybaby, who is dancing in a vacant ballroom. I have to say, I do love this outfit, but again, she is playing a high schooler, so it's pretty inappropriate. There are also scenes of her laying on a bed surrounded by very beachy ocean imagery, which reminded me a lot of these Nicoletta paintings. And obviously, though they share similarities with the seashells and blue ocean aesthetic, they are by no means replicas. I'm going to read a lot of these lyrics, and keep in mind, this song is called High School Sweethearts, about high schoolers. And Crybaby would be in 11th grade right now, if we follow the theory. If you can't handle a heart like mine, don't waste your time with me. If you're not down to bleed, no. Oh, if you can't handle the choking, the biting, the loving, the smothering, till you can't handle it no more, go home. Could you hold me through the night, put your lips all over my salty face when I start crying? Could you be my first time? Eat me up like apple pie. Make me not want to die. Love me rough and let me fly. Get me up, yeah, get me high. Tie me down, don't leave my side. Don't be a waste of my time. Can we just be honest? These are the requirements. If you think you can be my one and only true love, you must promise to love me. And damn it, if you fuck me over, I will rip your face apart. High school sweethearts, line up, not trying to waste my time. High school sweethearts, shut up if you're not my type. It is now the day of the school dance, and we see Crybaby sitting and the boy who gave her the love note from earlier waiting around the corner, working up the courage to ask Crybaby to the dance. And as he is about to make his move, he is intercepted by none other than the principal's son, who approaches Crybaby and asks her to the dance. Very weird turn of events. And also, he is literally acting as the principal. So this is just wildly inappropriate. Crybaby's internal dialogue notes how, with the poetic touch, she thought the love letter must have been written by a woman, but clearly thinks at this point the principal's son wrote it. Which, I mean, yeah, the note definitely has that very deeply emotional feminine touch. Not that men can't write heartfelt love letters, but Crybaby accepts his invitation, completely ignoring the fact that later that night she's supposed to manipulate the principal's son and hijack his office to tell the other students on the loudspeaker to escape. The other boy, who actually wrote the letter, unfortunately overhears all of this, and obviously hearing Crybaby accept his invitation, he is discouraged from asking her and walks away. So we've arrived at the dance. Everyone is in Victorian-style ball gowns and suits, having a good time, for the most part at least. Kelly, however, is not having a good time, and gets jealous when she sees her date dancing with another girl. She asks the other friends if they're just going to stand and watch this happen, and then says, "I made you. You guys are nothing without me." And they continue to ignore her. Kind of underwhelming, to be honest. I really thought we would get like a more grandiose ending to her arc, since she is kind of the major villain of the story. Well, I guess technically the major villain of the story is like the principal's son, but she's like the second major villain, okay? But yeah, no, basically she just gets kind of ignored. So, I mean, that's kind of lame, but whatever, I guess. Then we see Crybaby's friends discussing their plan, and Crybaby shows up to the dance. Her friends get upset when they see her, wondering why she's at the dance and not getting rid of the principal's son like she was supposed to. When she tells them the principal's son asked her to the dance, they scold her for letting him manipulate her. Crybaby attempts to apologize, but her friends tell her she's being selfish. Crybaby storms off to the bathroom, where she beats herself up for messing up the plan. Then a ghost appears behind her and tells her not to beat herself up. Before she says more, it cuts back to the dance where the principal's son speaks over the loudspeakers. He welcomes everyone to the dance, but then addresses Crybaby directly, stating he knew their plan all along, and that he knows they killed his father. Out of anger, he then locks the doors and forces everyone to dance against their will. Then the final track, Recess, starts playing. Crybaby's friends attempt to use their powers, but are unable to. We then cut back to the principal's office, where a random woman approaches the son, inquiring about an assistant's position. They make out, and the son brings the woman to another room, likely to engage in adult activities. But before he can, the woman shapeshifts, and it's Crybaby who locks the son in the room. She then breaks the curse, forcing all of the students to dance, and then tells everyone on the loudspeaker to escape. They do, but one person stays behind. It's the boy who wrote the love letter. He searches for Crybaby and finds her on the balcony of the building. She tells him to escape, and he tells her he wants to help, and reveals that he wrote the love letter. The two then discuss how to destroy the building, and the boy thinks and remembers earlier in the film when the tennis ball in the bubble came to him. He then asks Crybaby if she knows how to blow spit bubbles, and suggests that they pick the entire school up in a bubble off the ground. Meanwhile, the principal's son escapes the locked room. Crybaby and the boy blow a massive spit bubble and encapsulate the entire building, causing the building to levitate. Crybaby's friends watch from below, and as they ascend, Crybaby tells the boy they have to jump. He's reluctant, but they jump and they survive. We then see the building float away and the principal's son floating with it. The two then meet up with Crybaby's friends. The spirit woman from earlier appears, and a magic door is opened. Everyone goes in, except for Crybaby, who hesitates. And that is the end of K-12. Ended on a cliffhanger. Now, I know some of you are maybe wondering, wait, aren't there a bunch more songs on the K-12 album? Yes. On the K-12 Deluxe Edition, there are 7 more tracks following Recess. However, those tracks were initially released as an EP called the After School EP and are not part of the main storyline, nor are they featured in the film. I'm going to talk about the EP in my video where I discuss more of Melanie's unreleased music. Like I said, I was going to include that in this installment, but honestly, this video is already going to be so long, much longer than part 1, so that's going to just have to be its own video. I'm sorry. Alrighty, so let's talk about some of my thoughts and opinions of this film and album. Like with my last video on Crybaby, I'm going to start with the things I enjoyed, okay? Number 1, the visuals. I think it's pretty obvious by now that I really appreciate this film artistically. Everything from the setting to the costumes, the filter, the unique hairstyles, the dancing. I mean, this whole film is objectively just very visually pleasing, or I mean, in my opinion, but I think in the majority opinion as well. And like with Crybaby also, the storyline is pretty cohesive. I mean, for the most part, you know, there are definitely some parts that left me quite confused. I mean, for instance, the random spirit woman that we don't learn about at all, but just randomly appears, like, we don't know who she is or where she came from or why she's even there in the first place. Also, the random ghosts that we see throughout the film, we don't find out where they came from either. I mean, we can infer that maybe those are people who never escaped the school, but we don't ever get an explanation. But, I mean, other than those 2 things, I'd say the storyline was easy to follow and mostly made sense. I also like that this film and album touches on quite a few issues, everything from insecurity to jealousy, romance, corruption, to bigger things like being sexualized and abusive dynamics. I also do appreciate a lot of the gore in this film and the brutality, and I said that in my last video too about Crybaby. I really enjoy the contrast with like the kawaii Victorian aesthetic and the brutality of the film itself. I find it very interesting. Okay, so now let's talk about some of my criticisms, and I have many. So brace yourselves. First of all, again, just like in part 1 with Crybaby, why are we depicting these children in adult scenarios? Why? Why are we sexualizing children? Come on now, why? Why are we doing this again? I realize this is supposed to be like a school-themed album, okay? I get that. But why? Why did it have to be a school? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, or, I mean, okay, better yet, if it was going to be a school theme and like, you know, Melanie, like we were dead set on that concept, right? Why did it have to start in 1st grade and not like, I don't know, high school perhaps? Most of the themes within this album are much better suited for high schoolers and up, and I said that in my previous video, again with Crybaby. A lot of these themes and these situations that Melanie puts this child character Crybaby in are much more suited for adults. Like it doesn't make sense in the context of children. But even so, the majority of the story takes place in elementary and middle school, including the beginning of the album, Wheels on the Bus, where 1st graders, and they are at 1st grade at this time, okay? 1st graders are groping each other and stripping and smoking and, you know, all that. And look, I'm just gonna say this now because on my last video, you know, some very like brain dead people, in my opinion, commented saying that like all of the criticism for Melanie is fueled by purity culture. It's all purity culture, and that the people who criticize her are, you know, just afraid of sex and think you should never talk about sex and whatever else. Literally no one said that. I certainly didn't. I never fucking said that. Pop stars, the issue is not the sex. It's not the sex. It's not the fact that Melanie is singing about sex as a pop star. Pop stars do that all the time. In fact, I'd say most female pop stars, honestly, or at least a lot of the really mainstream ones, center their music around sex. They do. Like, that's a normal thing. Like, Chappell Roan, Sabrina Carpenter, Ariana Grande before she did this whole weird rebrand thing going on, okay? Like this, but this is nothing new. This is nothing new, okay? Even like, and listen, I love Chappell, okay? But Casual by Chappell Roan, literally the lyrics in the chorus, knee deep in the passenger seat and you're eating me out, okay? Like this happens, like no one cares if pop stars sing about sex. They don't. No one fucking cares. That's not the issue. Like, do you think I was born yesterday? I'm not just now discovering that singers talk about sex in their songs. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Oh, I had no fucking idea. No, I fucking knew that. Oh my god, like genuinely. The difference between what those pop stars are doing and what Melanie is doing is that in those songs, no matter how explicit and raunchy they are, right? They aren't talking about children in those scenarios or depicting children in their music videos. Like, how do you not understand that? How do you not get that? And this is why I'm not even gonna be nice, because like it's genuinely not a hard concept to grasp. It's not. It truly is not difficult to understand that the issue is not that pop stars sing about and drugs in their songs. It's the fact that this particular pop star in question is doing it in the context of literal babies, toddlers, and first graders. Like you genuinely need to talk to your doctor if you think the issue here is that Melanie talks about sex in her songs and not that she talks about sex in her songs in the context of children. Because like something is wrong with your brain if that's your first thought out of all of this. If your first thought after like viewing all of this is, oh, y'all are just mad over purity culture, Melanie sings about, like, it's your brain. It's your brain. I mean, honestly, either that or on the other side of it, you don't actually see an issue with singing about sex in the context of children. Which, I mean, in that case, honestly, like, not only does your head need to be checked, but so does your hard drive. And I'd also like to just quickly point out that purity culture is rooted in religious extremism, specifically evangelical Christianity. And as someone who was raised very Catholic, who is now completely non-religious, I can tell you that one thing that's quite common within these spaces, purity culture spaces, is the sexual abuse of children. Yeah. So actually, in that way, Melanie's music would actually appeal more to those people and purity culture, as her music both normalizes and glamorizes the sexual abuse of children. But yeah, sure. I just blame it on purity culture, I guess. You know, you're definitely not probably a sexual predator. Yeah, sure. And oh, FYI, I just want to say I was not used in the Catholic Church. I just want to clarify that in case that like came across as I'm saying it happened to me. It did not happen to me, but it's a very well-known fact, and it didn't happen to me, but it's a very well-known fact that it happens, and I know people personally who did experience and witness it happen, okay? And look, don't get me wrong, like at this point, I am very used to people either like misrepresenting me or just not understanding what I'm saying in my videos. Like, that's not new, I'm used to that happening, but oh my god, I cannot believe, like, I genuinely cannot believe how many people actually just completely lack comprehension skills when it comes to this topic specifically. Like, specifically, Melanie Martinez. Like, genuinely, like, the amount of comments of, well, I thought it was obvious that she wasn't literally talking about children. And I'm like, literally, like, these people will write whole ass essays, and I'm like, what about the quote of she's a child who experiences adult things? Do you not understand? Like, what is it? Like, what part of it is not registering to you? Like people would genuinely, and you can go and look at the comments right now, I'm not lying, they would write these long ass essays in my comments explaining all of the reasons why they think she's not literally talking about children. And I would literally just reply, no essay, she's a child who experiences adult things. That's it, right? And then they come back with, I hear you, but, and I'm like, but like, do you actually hear me though? Do you hear me? Are you sure? Are you positive? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you hear me, because how do you hear she's a child, CHILD, child who experiences adult things, and interpret that and come back with, well, I thought she wasn't literally talking about a child. Look, is it me? Is it me? Am I just crazy? Like genuinely, like, is it me? Because like, where is the disconnect? Like, where is it? Not to mention all of the other very obvious clues, you know, her dressing as children, making many children's references, and also the fact that K through 12 is a story about Crybaby going to school and entering first grade. And people still had the audacity to say it's obvious that Crybaby follows the character as she becomes a teenager. Right. So Crybaby follows the character as a teenager. And yet the following album, the continuation of the story, starts when she's in first grade. Like, you're stupid if you read all of this and see all of this evidence and still think that she isn't talking about children. You're just stupid. Like you are. Things like Strawberry Shortcake, for instance, okay? I think the message behind that song isn't like a good and, you know, I don't know if it's a powerful message, right? But like, it's a good message. And I think it's a message that definitely resonates with a lot of young women in particular, and like teenage girls. I do appreciate the message of that song. And I especially resonated with the message of that song as a young girl when my body began developing and I went through puberty a little earlier than life than some of my peers. I became very insecure and I started getting a lot more unwanted attention. And not to mention, I was often the girl that was told that my shorts were too short or that I was showing too much of my shoulders, like distracting the boys. Which, like, by the way, the shoulder thing is actually insanely fucking weird. Like, that is, like, if you're a person or a teacher who thinks exposed shoulders is somehow inappropriate or sexual, then the problem is you. Like, honestly, the problem is you. And like, I'm looking at you a little funny because that's more of a reflection on you than it is on everyone else, right? If you somehow see shoulders as a sexual thing when the majority of people do not, do we need to check your hard drive too? Like, come on now. Now, while I do appreciate the message, the execution of that message, I definitely do not appreciate. I mean, is the concept of Crybaby as a cake, you know, artistic and visually cool? I mean, sure. But she's a child. Not to mention, she's completely topless. You know, that was so unnecessary. She could have executed this concept and message very differently and made it a lot more appropriate. She could have actually just shown herself doing things like stuffing her bra out of insecurity or showing herself getting sent home from school for her short being too short or boys ogling her and stuff, right? And I'm sure this was, you know, Melanie's attempt to just be more creative, which I guess in a way I can appreciate, but I would have appreciated it much more if Crybaby was an adult. The fact that she's playing a child makes me unable to fully appreciate the, artistry of it all because it's just weird and inappropriate. Or at the very least, and look, I'm not saying this would make it all better and okay, that's not what I'm saying. But at the very least, if she really wanted to do this whole cake concept, right? Why did Crybaby have to be topless? Why? Like, why couldn't the cake have gone up to her shoulders, for instance, and just shown her head? Why? And, not to mention all the really suggestive dancing throughout the film. Again, unnecessary and not appropriate in the context of children. In the context of adults, yeah, fine, obviously. Like, no issue with that, go for it. But in the context of children, you shouldn't be like grinding and air humping in lingerie. You know what I mean? Like, that's just like weird. It's fucking weird. And no, again, that's not purity culture. That is not purity culture. That's literally just not being predatory and creepy. That's all. That's what it is. Like, the children aspect of this is what makes this inappropriate. I need everyone to understand that. It's not the actual dancing and the cake and all of that. It's all of these things in the context of children specifically. High school sweethearts, again, wildly inappropriate in the context of children. She's literally singing about choking, being tied down, tasting her apple pie, and in the same breath, singing about high school sweethearts while role-playing a child. How did no one at the time, and I've been having this thought a lot, how did no one at the time, at the very least, look at just that song isolated by itself and not see an issue? Like, just that song. Like, genuinely, the song is literally called High School Sweethearts, and no one had the thought of like, maybe we shouldn't be singing about children eating each other's apple pies. Like, no one at the time had that thought. Like, genuinely, like, I'm like, how did no one have this thought? And like with the Crybaby album, I thought a lot about this whole album school concept and how this could have been done differently and kept all of these same elements and themes and still been in the context of adults, right? Now, remember how I said to mentally note that one line where Melanie references The Wizard of Oz in the song Drama Club? Okay, so hear me out for 1 second. While I was watching this film and thinking about how could we have done all this with adults, and I was looking at the whole like pastel, vintage Victorian aesthetic as well as the whole school academia element, and immediately I thought of Wicked. In the film for Wicked, the story takes place in a college setting, Shiz University. All of the students are college age. It's very lavish and colorful and Victorian. It has both those girly, soft elements with Glinda, and also has those stronger, deeper messages such as racism and corruption and power imbalances. But it also deals with themes of romance and insecurity, beauty, cliques. Literally, there are actually so many similarities between these two things. And yet, it's all in the context of college-aged adults or older. Class fight, for instance, okay? The two main characters fight. Comparable to Glinda and Elphaba in the beginning. They're both adversaries. The principal, for instance, he's corrupt, evil, and authoritarian, remarkably similar to the wizard in Wicked and Madame Morrible. Drama club, easily can be done in the context of college. Lunchbox friends, that takes place in a cafeteria. There is a whole scene during the song What Is This Feeling in Wicked that takes place in the university cafeteria. Teacher's pet, not only could that concept be executed in college, but it's actually far more applicable in the context of college. I mean, how often do we hear stories of professors engaging in inappropriate relationships with their students in college settings? That happens constantly. Even recess, that involves a school dance. There is a whole scene in Wicked that takes place at a dance. Now, I realize the film for Wicked only came out last year and K-12 came out in 2019. And look, I have not read the story for Wicked, so I don't know how accurate the film is to the original source material, and I've heard there were some things left out, so I'm sure there will be at least one person in my comments scolding me about that, but like that's not the real point I'm trying to drive home, okay? My point is, like I said with Crybaby in my last video, if you just use a little bit more thought, you can keep all of these elements, not only the aesthetic, but the actual plot and themes, and do so in the context of college-age adults. It even still keeps that school educational theme. So why did it have to be children? It's just very interesting to me that she wrote that line about the Wizard of Oz because this whole thing reminded me so much of Wicked, not just visually, but like the whole educational concept, and I couldn't help but think how much better this would all be if it was like Wicked in the sense of it being college level. And I'm just using Wicked as an example of how you can execute these things on an adult level. So even if the film is not totally accurate to the book, the point is that it can be done. Now, moving on, I want to talk about another thing that I haven't seen other people talk about, specifically with the track Orange Juice. So I said this before, Orange Juice is a song about ED, specifically bulimia. And as we saw in the music video, we see visual depictions of this, especially at the beginning of the music video. And this is another song that I have weird feelings about. I mean, first off, visual depictions, even if they're not overly graphic of things such as EDs, is, it's a choice. It's definitely a choice, you know? But another thing, when you listen closely to this song, you can actually hear gagging noises and pouring liquid noises throughout the whole track. Now look, Melanie incorporating unique sounds into her songs or sounds that fit the theme of the song is not a new thing. She has said in multiple interviews that she often incorporates different sounds in her music. Like I said earlier, she did this in the song Nurse's Office, where she used coughing sounds and Band-Aid ripping sounds. And she did this in songs off of Crybaby as well. You can hear liquid sounds in Sippy Cup, you can hear crying sounds in the Crybaby song. Even in Soap, you can kind of hear like bubble popping sounds and sort of like wet, slippery sounds. And in the same interview I showed earlier where she mentions her artistic inspirations, later in that interview she talks about how she incorporates unique sounds in her songs and even shares a story of her going to the dollar store and buying a bunch of different toys to see what sounds she could use from those toys in her songs. So it's not like this is something that she only did for Orange Juice. This is sort of like a little trademark of hers. But even so, the choice to include gagging and pouring liquid sounds in a song about bulimia that is meant to resonate with those struggling with it is, I mean, okay, let me put it like this, right? And I've said this before on my channel, but some of you who are not on my channel may not know this, but I am someone who struggled very heavily with and I've dealt with it on and off for years since I was 11 years old. Unfortunately, I have many scars to show for it, right? So that would be equivalent to me writing a song about self-harm meant to resonate with those struggling with self-harm and including blade slicing sounds and like blood spatter sounds throughout the song. Would anyone in the class like to raise their hand and share why I might think that including these sounds in these types of songs might be an issue? It is unbelievably, incredibly, tremendously triggering. Oh my god, who let her do this? Who the fuck let her do this? I'm honestly really glad that I both watched and listened to this film multiple times because I did not catch this right away. It wasn't until like the 5th time that I had heard this that I picked up on this, mainly because I was more focused on the film visually at first. And this goes back to my point in my first video that I don't think any of this is truly about awareness like Melanie has claimed. Not at all. There is no way she actually did any research or spoke to ED advocates and educators before deciding to do this. Anyone with a basic understanding of these things would know enough to not include actual audible puking sounds in a song meant to resonate with people struggling with and would recognize the potential for that to be triggering. That is just like so careless, so devoid of self-awareness, and I'm honestly shocked that no one has brought this up. And I've read a lot of comments from people on TikTok and on YouTube videos saying they felt weird about orange juice specifically, but I haven't seen anyone actually point this out yet. And, this is actively triggering. And even if the message is about self-acceptance or whatever, it doesn't make that acceptable. It just doesn't. Teacher's pet. Again, many complex feelings about this. Now, let me be clear. I did state in my last video that I resonate with some of the themes in Melanie's music, especially in the Crybaby album. But this song is not one of them. I've never experienced a teacher being abusive in that way towards me, and I was actually very close with a few of my teachers growing up, closer than with a lot of my peers, to be honest. But it was never inappropriate or crossed that boundary, and I'm very grateful for that. Therefore, I spent a lot of time researching and gathering perspectives from all sides on this track, including many people who stated they've experienced this kind of abuse from a teacher. There are two sides to this conversation from what I've gathered. There are people who really resonate with the song and the video and appreciate it, saying they felt understood and validated. And then there are also people who looked at the song and video and stated they feel that, like with many other Melanie songs, that the abuse is being glorified and portrayed as a good thing, and like Angelita wants the abuse, etc. So I'm going to read a very long but informative paragraph from an EBSCO article regarding teacher on student sexual abuse and then discuss this a little bit more. Students are taught to trust their instructors and leaders, but sexual abuse in school manipulates students into sexual contact by lying, controlling, and exercising their authority over them. Often, predators victimize students who are vulnerable or marginalized and often needy for attention. These marginal students are also more likely to be unaccepted as plausible or trustworthy complainants. In elementary schools, the abuser is often a favorite teacher and is often professionally accomplished. Successful educators are most likely to connect quickly and easily with children. At the later levels of education, namely middle and high schools, abusers are not necessarily always wonderful educators. Initially, the acts are more often open opportunities as a result of poor choices or a misguided sense of authority. Most abuse occurs with grooming and enticement. Abusers try to spend additional time with students, and they may send invites to non-education-based activities like trips, movies, and parties that occur during after-school hours. Abusers may also buy students gifts, tell sexual jokes, and tease them sexually. This form of verbal abuse is a method of grooming victims. As such joking continues without being reprimanded, abusers may advance their intimate play by touching and making other sexual advances that probably will not be reported. Offenders work hard at maintaining secrecy and silence. Many children have been abused by others, or they fear punishment. Some children do not realize that they are being abused. However, they may be able to understand the inappropriate relationship as shameful, unwanted, wrong, or frightening. Children often assume that such behavior is love, as this is explained to them by their abusers. Offenders use intimidation, exploitation of power, and manipulation of a child's affection to keep the misconduct a secret. So a lot of these dynamics involve grooming tactics, and a lot of children in these dynamics may not recognize that they're being abused right away, and can even often assume that this abuse is love. They may feel like they are consenting to the abuse and that they are special, and may even view the abuse as an actual relationship. So I could be wrong about this, but in this specific case with Teacher's Pet, I can see how some people look at it on the surface and get the impression that it's glorifying the abuse and that the student Angelita wants it to happen or is asking for it. And in all fairness, it certainly would not be the first time Melanie poorly portrayed CSA and made it look romantic and normal. But I think maybe what Melanie was trying to convey here was this particular grooming aspect and how sometimes these students can be manipulated into thinking this is something they want or that they are consenting to a real relationship and not identify it as a. Even in the song, the line, "Teacher's pet, if I'm so special, why am I secret?" and "I know I'm young, but my mind is well beyond my years." That to me is a call out to grooming behaviors and the psychological manipulation involved in these dynamics, how the teacher can make the student feel like they are special and that they understand them and that they're engaging in a real relationship and not being a. In the alternative press interview statement Melanie made that I read earlier when discussing this track, she says, "I remember as a kid when a teacher would always get caught with a student. The news would always portray it as a teacher-student affair, instead of calling it what it is, which is abuse, and really just that teacher exerting the power of their age over a child." So I do think that Melanie does understand that this is abuse, and I think she was perhaps trying to shed light on how these dynamics work and how so often they can be misunderstood as affairs or relationships, particularly by the media, when in reality it's a. Now, just because I'm saying that I think that was what Melanie was trying to convey does not mean that it necessarily landed, because there are still a lot of people who viewed this and interpreted it as another instance of Melanie glamorizing CSA, and I don't blame them for that. But I do think there is something to be said for all the people who are survivors of this specific kind of CSA saying that they felt seen and understood by this video and really resonated with it because of their own situations. I think that does mean something and is worth considering. And I know there are people that will probably interpret that and say that I'm defending Melanie here or being charitable to her. And I've made it abundantly clear by now how much I disagree with Melanie's portrayal of things like SA and CSA in her music and her music videos. But I do think it's possible that this one isolated instance of her portraying these things could actually be spreading awareness and accurately representing these dynamics. It may be the only time she actually succeeded in this, but of course, like always, you guys can give your perspectives and insight on that in the comments, and I especially would like to hear from those of you who have survived that kind of abuse and how you interpreted it, and maybe if you agree or if you disagree in certain ways. I would love to hear that feedback. I think I've pretty much expressed all of my criticisms for this album in film, but if I think of any more, I'm sure I'll add another clip in between this video giving further criticism. So now let's talk more about the art. I compared a lot of these scenes to different paintings from Nicoletta and Ryden, the two artists that Melanie cited as her biggest artistic inspirations. And if you're someone who doesn't particularly care for this aspect and you don't see any parallels between any of the paintings and the film, I guess you can just skip this section and go to the next one. But if you are like me and you are starting to pick up on those parallels and make those connections I made, I now want to discuss some of the other paintings from these individuals that are far more suggestive and darker than the ones I referenced. And we will mostly honestly be focusing on Nicoletta because, like I said before, Mark Ryden, there just isn't as much, okay? Like I researched them both, and I did see a comment from someone in my last video saying that there's a lot more with Mark Ryden, and I'm like, maybe there is, but based on a lot of the research I've done, I haven't found anything nearly to the degree as Nicoletta. Like I said, there are those handful of paintings that depict nude subjects that could maybe be children, but it's not super obvious to me in the way that Nicoletta's paintings are so obvious, That's just my opinion, so we're not really going to be going over Mark Ryden as much. If you know of some things that maybe I did miss in that regard, comment below. Honestly, if you can reference specific pieces of art, let me know, but I couldn't find anything to the degree of Nicoletta. I just couldn't, okay? And again, I'm not going to be showing any of these paintings, but I will be naming them and describing them in enough detail so that you understand the picture. So just a trigger warning for that. So like I said with Mark Ryden, I personally think that Melanie was probably a lot more inspired by Nicoletta than Mark Ryden, but that's my opinion. So I'll start from the earliest ones and kind of work my way up. So in 2006, she released a painting titled Allurement. This painting depicts a young girl. Her chest is fully exposed. She's sitting sideways on a couch with her legs hanging over the armrest, and she's wearing a skirt resembling a flower with a bee pollinating between her legs. The same year, there's another painting titled Serendipity, and this one depicts a young girl in a very domineering position, holding a whip in one hand and has an insect-like creature below her wearing a collar and a chain leash. The same year, titled She's So Lovely, it depicts a young girl riding a rabbit, holding a whip above its behind and holding it by a chain leash and a collar. Another one titled Egg. Another young girl, her lower half of her body is just a giant egg with a crack and birds flying out of where her private area would be located. Moving on to 2007, titled Aurora. This depicts a young girl who is laying on top of a tree. She is sort of like a half cocoon, half human, and a bee is resting right on top of her private area. Cat Girl depicts a young girl sitting on a chair. There are mice crawling all over her, including underneath her dress. Lepidoptera. This shows a young girl in an empty room, and a giant butterfly is coming through the window with other miniature butterflies. And they are sucking on cherries that the girl is holding with her dress. And she's using her dress as sort of like a bowl or basket, like kind of, I can't show it on camera, but like holding it like this. And the cherries are directly placed where her private area would be. So 2008, this one is titled Contrary Mary, and this is a young girl lifting up her dress where a dragon is hiding and crawling from underneath. Another one titled Cecilia. In this one, a young girl is holding a reptile on a leash in front of her with another reptile crawling underneath her dress behind her. It could be a tail, but considering she has many paintings with the similar concept, it probably isn't. It honestly probably isn't. 2009, titled Rose Red. This one shows a small rabbit about to enter a maze. At the center of the maze is a young girl who is wearing a dress resembling a rose. She is standing above the center of the maze, so the center of the maze is inside of the girl's dress. This one is called Georgina Tames the Dragon, and this one shows a young girl with a dragon entangled between her legs. She is lifting up her dress, and red fruit is pouring out from underneath, which the dragon is opening its mouth ready to consume. Another one titled Octopussy Girl. Yes, no, not octopus. Octopussy, and it's spelled the way you think too. This one shows a topless young girl sitting on a couch, and her lower half is just octopus tentacles. We're in 2010 now. This one is titled Playmate, and this one in particular really disturbed me. It is of a young girl who is sitting on the ground with her legs spread open, and between her legs is a toy Pinocchio who is holding her dress open with his hands and pointing his elongated Pinocchio nose up her skirt between her legs. So, like, peeking inside of her dress with his nose and holding up her skirt while doing so. Try to Catch Me. This is another one with a girl sitting with her legs spread open with a rabbit hole between her legs, and the rabbit is poking up through the hole. 2011, this one is called Rapture. This shows a young girl who is either sleeping, unconscious, or dead. She's being held by a devil creature who is sticking its tongue out, about to lick the girl's chest. And by the way, just to be clear, when I say young girl, I mean that these are like toddler, elementary school age girls. I mean, there are some that you could argue might be teen girls, mainly the ones that have bare chests, but the vast majority of the paintings I'm describing are depicting very obviously young child girls. And I'm giving you the titles and dates of these so that you can look it up yourself. It's not subtle, like it's obvious. Just Dessert is also a painting from 2011, and this is the one I showed earlier when we discussed Strawberry Shortcake, the one with the young girl as a cake with the pair of legs holding a knife cutting between where her legs would be with red frosting pouring out. And by the way, I'm just going to say this too because I've already mentioned a few paintings that have like the red frosting coming out or like the red cherries and candies. If you, I think most people probably understand the symbolism of that, but if you don't, when women, so obviously on the one hand, there is the whole concept of periods and menstrual blood, and it could be that, but in my opinion, based on a lot of the suggestive messaging and scenarios, right? I think it's more likely referencing how when women lose their virginity, they tend to bleed. So that's why when I say things like opening up her dress and like red cherries coming out or like red frosting pouring out, that is what that is meant to symbolize, at least in my opinion. And she has a lot of paintings with red stuff, particularly in this concept. That is what I believe is the goal. This is also the same year as the Almost Alice painting, which I mentioned in my last video is one of the paintings Melanie actually cited specifically as inspiration. This is the one with the young girl who looks like Alice, whose legs are spread with a rabbit jumping between them towards her private area. 2012, this one is titled Cuddle. This is a painting of a young girl who is completely naked, with her chest being barely covered by a reptile that she is holding on her chest. Barbara, this is a very similar concept to Cuddle, only instead of a reptile covering her naked body, it's a large gingerbread cookie. 2013, this one is titled Sweet Addiction. This is a young girl in a Candyland setting who is lifting up her dress, and red candies are falling out and an animal is eating them. This one is called All We Need Is Love. This is also in a Candyland setting. A young girl is riding a swing and she's kicking off her shoes with her legs spread, and a rabbit is looking up between her legs on the ground. Like the rabbit is on the ground. 2014, Dangerous Liaisons, another one with a young girl lifting up her dress, revealing an octopus underneath who is about to attack a small man. Consumed by You. This is another painting in a Candyland setting. A young girl is pinning down a human-sized ice cream cone with her knee, and she's taking a bite out of it. It's like a very obviously like domineering, suggestive position. This one is called Lorelei. This is another young naked girl holding a fish with her hands that is covering her chest and her lower region. This one, titled Honey, I'm Home, shows a rabbit entering a room, and hiding behind the door is a young girl holding another rabbit, and this is very clearly meant to suggest an affair. We're in 2016 now. This one is titled Big Bad Liar, and this is another one that really disturbs me. This is of a young girl. She is standing above a large toy Pinocchio. The Pinocchio is laying on the ground looking up at her. The girl is in heels and tights. She is pinning him down with her foot on his chest. In one hand, she is holding a whip about to whip him, and in the other hand, she is holding a leash attached to a collar on his neck. This one is called Gingerbread Love. Again, another one in a Candyland setting, and this young girl is pinning down a human-sized gingerbread cookie with her knees and hands, and she is taking a bite out of the cookie. Persistence in Pink. This one shows a young girl in a large pink princess dress. There is a locked door where her inner legs would be, and a man below is holding a key for the lock. This one is titled Play With Me. This shows a young girl opening a door that is on her chest, and inside of it is clockwork, kind of like what the inside of a clock looks like. 2017, this is when the painting Theater of Lies was released that I showed earlier during Show and Tell, and it's the one with the girl in the blue dress with the dancing puppet between her legs. 2018, this one is titled Suddenly. A young girl is bending over, and behind her is a giant octopus staring at her behind and drooling. 2019, Sacrifice of the Virgin. This depicts a young girl holding a red snake, and the snake is biting her chest and she is bleeding. Till the End. This shows a young girl sitting on a bench next to a human-sized gingerbread man. The girl is also dressed as a cake, and there is frosting melting where her breasts are, and the gingerbread is holding a spoon, catching the melting frosting from her breast, and is about to consume it. 2020, this is titled Into the Looking Glass, and this is of a young Alice-like girl kissing her own reflection in the mirror. Forbidden Fruit. A young girl is sitting, her legs are extended, and a snake that looks like a candy cane is wrapped around her legs and is holding a lollipop in its mouth. 2022, titled Awakening. Another naked young girl, butterflies are covering her private area. Same year, this is titled Who's Bad? This depicts a small wolf-like creature laying on the ground, and there is a young girl who is dressed as Red Riding Hood, positioned on top of the small wolf on her hands and knees, stroking its chin with her hand. Okay, so actually, chiming in here, editing me, for some reason I skipped over this one when I was reading my script. It was probably an accident. There's another one of a young girl, topless. She's laying on some kind of rock or like a toadstool, like mushroom or something like that. I don't know. And she's squirting milk out of one of her breasts, literally with her hand, and the milk is going into the mouth of an animal. Do we now see why I focus so heavily on the art and the inspiration for the art that Melanie cited? Do we kind of see a pattern here? I know that was a very long list, but I'm trying to demonstrate that this is not just a few paintings happening to be suggestive. I just listed paintings from 2006 all the way to 2022. That is 16 years. Melanie has stated Nicoletta is one of her biggest inspirations. Now you know the whole picture. So, now that you understand the inspiration behind all of Melanie's work, and specifically K-12, tell me again that this is all just for the aesthetic and that this is not a fantasy. Tell me again that there's not something more nefarious going on here. Tell me again that this is not predatory. Tell me again that it's just purity culture. I am not even going to entertain the idea, even slightly, that Melanie didn't know that any of these other paintings existed and hasn't seen them. We are not going to entertain what is so very obviously bullshit. If you're not convinced at this point, then the issue is you. The issue is genuinely you. Research it yourself. Everything I just said is true. You can literally Google Nicoletta and insert any title I just referenced and you will see it all for yourself. It's very publicly available. Let me be very clear. It is not, N-O-T, not a coincidence that so much of Melanie's music and music videos consist of her romanticizing CSA and sexing children or blending children and adult themes, and also just so happens to be really inspired by an artist that very clearly has done the same thing throughout their career. That is not a coincidence. And if you think it is, you are just in full-blown denial at this point. You are, genuinely. Hopefully now, if you weren't fully convinced before and you're skeptical, you are convinced now. This has never been about the aesthetic. It was always much deeper than that. And we have one final thing to seal the coffin on all of this. So let's now discuss Melanie's friend, Elita, who played Angelita in the film. So Elita Harkov, whose real name is Emma Harvey, is a 29-year-old Canadian musician, actress, and Instagram model. And on most platforms, she goes by the nickname Young Elita. She is the daughter of a Canadian filmmaker slash director slash producer, Kenneth J. Harvey, and she actually starred in one of his films titled I'm 14 and I Hate the World, and she was age 16 when she did that, and this is how she got introduced to acting. And Elita also started doing cam work at age 16, which she no longer does, and FYI, in Canada, the legal age of consent is 16, hence why she was able to legally be a cam girl. As a result of her doing cam work, she was very open publicly about some of her sexual interests. Her Tumblr page, which has now been deleted, contained a lot of material that really showcased some of the things she was interested in. And though most of this stuff has been deleted, a lot of it has been archived on Wayback Machine, Web Archive, Reddit, Lolcow, etc. Let me just say right now, I will not be showing any of the images I will be referencing for a multitude of reasons. Number one, the explicit nature of them, obviously. Two, at least some of the pictures of Elita specifically, this would probably constitute revenge. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. Three, some of these images she shared, I do not know the actual source, and it could potentially be illegal. And you'll understand what I mean in a second. There's way too much risk. So I'm not even going to show like blurred images of this. Like, I don't even want this shit on my computer, okay? Like, genuinely, like, ugh. But all of this is out there, and you can find it pretty easily if you know your way around Web Archive and stuff. But if you do choose to look at any of this, number one, be prepared mentally, but also be extremely cautious. Personally, I would not share, nor would I save any of this. And again, we don't know some of the sources of this. So I don't know how much of these things are like staged and fake or if they are real. Now, let me explain. So like I said, was very open about some of her interests. These interests include DDLG, age play, knife play, rape, torture, self-harm, incest, and there were even some mentions of bestiality, but I could not find that. But animals do come up in a different way, actually. It's incredibly dark stuff. She also has claimed to be addicted to Xanax at some points in her life, and her Tumblr used to have a cover photo of just a Xanax bar. Apparently, she also romanticized addiction, which, I mean, is honestly like child's play compared to the rest of this shit. Like, who even cares about that, honestly? So, while I cannot show any of these more explicit images, and quite frankly, I don't want to, there are a lot of posts from her Tumblr of her replying to different questions regarding some of her interests that I will read for you. So on July 29th, 2014, someone asked her what her opinions of pedophiles were. And she replies, I don't know, I'm a sicko. On February 24th, 2014, someone asked her, I don't even want to read this, when daddy touches your parts, how old do you wish / pretend you were? And she replies, 12. 12 years old. She fantasizes about being 12 years old when she's engaging in adult activities. There's one from April 29th, 2015 that I absolutely cannot read and would have to censor every other word out of my mouth if I did, but I'll censor it as much as I can, like the image itself, and I'll put the screenshot on screen and you can pause and read it for yourself. Good luck. Another one, someone asked, who needs a daddy? I can be your uncle. And she replies, into it. April 27th, 2015, someone asked, wait, so you're into incest? You must have no morals. And she replies, basically. May 15th, 2015, someone asks again, you're into incest? I saw the dad and brother ask. She replies, daddy and daughter. And she also reposted, and FYI, I don't know my way around Tumblr as well as other platforms, so I apologize if I'm using like incorrect terminology, like reposting and cover photo and whatever. She reposted a post from a page called Daughter Lover, which contains hashtags such as daddy and daughter, hashtag incestuous. She liked to post talking about incest porn as well, which, I mean, there's a lot of that, to be honest. Here are a couple images I can show. In this one, she's drinking from a baby bottle and she posted that on her Instagram story. There's another one, is her wearing a pacifier with hashtag saying age play. This one deeply disturbs me and upsets me, to be honest. This is another post where she says her pussy is tighter than a 12-year-old's. I audibly gasped and gagged simultaneously when I read that one. I was stunned. She also reposted a drawing on her Instagram story of a very obviously little girl who is shooting up drugs intravenously. She also did a photo shoot for the makeup brand Lime Crime, which is highly controversial by itself. If you don't know anything about that, that's a rabbit hole. Maybe I'll go down it someday in a video. And in this photo shoot, she dressed as Lolita. And if you're unaware of the story of Lolita, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier when we talked about Lolita fashion subculture, it is a story and film about a man who falls in love with a 12-year-old that lives in his apartment complex. And FYI, let me just stop you right now before I hear well, she was 18 and 19 when she posted those. I do not care. I don't care. I don't care. That does not matter. That does not matter. You are old enough at 18 and 19 years old to know better than to post in an age and that your is tighter than a 12-year-old. You are. And look, I'm just going to be honest. None of you would be making those excuses if it was the man in her position. You wouldn't. Y'all really need to start holding women accountable to the same standards as men when it comes to this stuff. The double standard is absolutely fucking ridiculous. If an 18 or 19-year-old man got in his computer talking about another girl saying their was tighter than a 12-year-old and bragging about it, you guys would have a field day. You would tear that shit apart. But let it be a pretty 18-year-old girl. Oh, suddenly it's fine? No, it isn't. It's not fine. And also, FYI, she continued to post stuff like this for years to follow. You know, there are archive posts up until 2020. And she would have been well into her 20s at this point. And that was also at the same time as her starring in K-12. So I don't give a flying if she was 18 or 19 posting this. I do not care. There is no excuse. I don't even care if it's trolling, which I don't think it is, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. But even if it was trolling, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck, because why are you trolling like that? Why are you trolling like that? Who are you trolling? That's the question, right? When people say it's trolling, who are you trolling for? Pedophiles? People into incest? Who are you trolling? All I'm saying. Oh, and keep in mind, all of this was like public. So Melanie featured Elita in a lead role in K-12, knowing this was out there. Oh, and she also apparently slept with Jacob Hoggard of the band Headley, who is a convicted rapist. So that's nice. That's great. So let me now explain some of the more disturbing things I saw. So there were posts of actual fresh self were either posted to Tumblr or Instagram stories. There was also, and trigger warning for animal, a picture of a dead lamb, I think it is, a small lamb that was cut open with its insides pulled out. There were also a few images of either staged or potentially real rape. There was one with a woman with her feet tied and duct tape on her mouth, and she was being held by a man. There was another one that showed what looked like a gang rape of a woman. One man was committing the and another was holding the woman's limbs so that she could not move, and there were many other men standing around her. And there was another one that particularly disturbed me of a person holding a plastic bag over a woman's head and suffocating her. I can't really verify whether these are staged fake things or if they are real. I have no way to verify it, and I don't even want to go down that road at all. But I will say, nothing about these images indicate that it isn't real. Like, there's no context whatsoever. It's just exactly how I described it. Look, if you're someone with like fantasies and or into blood, like, that's your thing. If if you're not hurting anyone and you want to explore that, that's your thing. I mean, obviously the whole thing, there's a lot there, but like, if you're just doing your thing and you're an adult and you're sharing that with another adult and nobody is getting hurt, whatever, that's your thing. But that does not belong on the internet. Real images of fresh self don't belong on the internet. Neither does depictions, real or not, of or a woman being strangled and suffocated with a bag. Especially when you have a platform of hundreds of thousands of people that you're sharing this content to who did not consent to see it. And I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but at this time that she was posting these things, even to her Instagram stories, some of them, she had hundreds of thousands of followers. Just saying. She also really glorified serial killers, and there's multiple posts about that, but I'll show one on screen. I saw a picture that she took that had a text underneath saying that it was the Menendez brothers' house, and she's standing in front of the house, like, taking a picture of herself. She's also sold really weird stuff on her Depop. I saw one that was like a handmade fake mirror scene. So it was like a pink girly bedroom setup, but it was like a murder and it was all bloody. Honestly, like, what kind of person would buy that sort of thing? Like, genuinely. Like, why? And that's not, by the way, there are other images of actual scenes on this as well. There was one I saw that was a picture of like the front of a house, and there was a door and there was a window above the door, and the window was covered in blood. Like, the window itself and the like the outside wall of the house, all like covered in blood. And another one of the really dark things that I saw, and I'm almost convinced that this is like AI or something, or Photoshopped, like, I don't know, it looks very real. But there is an image of a young girl who, she looks no older than like 4 or 5 years old, and she's standing in front of one of those like gardening wheelbarrows, and with both of her hands, she is holding something in the wheelbarrow, and the thing she is holding is a decapitated goat's head. So yeah, that's some of the highlights of the thing that I found deep in the archives. And like I said, I cannot show any of this. I don't want to show any of this, even censored. So if you just don't believe me and like you need to see it for yourself, you can go back and if you know what you're doing, go into the Wayback Machine, go through all 138 pages of the pull thread like I did, and you can see it for yourself. There is no way in hell that Melanie Martinez just so happened, after everything else, just so happened to befriend a girl with the exact same fetishes and interests as her, and that is just like one mighty big coincidence. Just like all the other mighty big coincidences. And if you're gonna try to convince me of that in the comments, let me stop you right now. Just stop, put your keyboard down, and look at me, and hear my words. You are f***ing stupid, and you need a brain transplant. I have no patience for bullshit. I'm so beyond over it. I am so over it. I am so done. I am so done with Melanie fans trying to make excuses for every coincidence and every little fucked up detail in all of this. Like, what more can I even say at this point? If you're not convinced by now, then honestly, I just think you're a I do. I think you're a predator. If you're not convinced and you're still arguing after all of this, I think you're a predator. I do. Like, I think by now, after everything I've shown between this video and my first video, if you still think that these are just coincidences, all of the parallels within the art, all of this children's themes, the role playing, the children in babies' clothes, the fact that Melanie has experienced none of it, the fact that her close friend in the film just so happens to also be a weirdo creep. You are just a pedophile. You are attracted to all of this, and you are trying to validate it to yourself and everyone else. I refuse to accept any other reality, because if you even have just one brain cell, one working brain cell, after seeing all of this, there should be no other conclusion than just Melanie is a very disturbed person who is acting out a fantasy through her music. That's it. Period. End of discussion. And FYI, honestly, if you do try to convince me in the comments after all of this, I will not only call you a pedophile and a predator, but I won't engage, and I'm going to delete your comments. I'm going to delete your comment and I'm going to hide you from my channel. You know, because if you're still trying to downplay and excuse and minimize this after seeing mountains of evidence that I've provided, it's because there's something wrong with you. Only a predator would try to excuse this. It's just reality. I don't think there's anything more I can say. So, you know, this video is already going to be long as hell, so I think I'll just end it here. In conclusion, Melanie is a fucked up person. And not in an interesting or quirky way, in a very predatory, borderline pedophilic way. I mean, can we even say borderline at this point? Is it borderline, or is it just, you know? After all of this, I'm beyond sickened and disgusted, and a part of me wishes I never went down this rabbit hole. I got sucked in so deep that now all of these images and art are burned into my brain, and I think I need to wash my mind out with soap. Ha 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 ha. I'm only slightly laughing. Not really. I think I actually would feel a bit better if I ate a bar of soap. Maybe I'll try it. Anyways, I'm going to do the allegations next. I know I said something about the portals analysis, but at this point, it's not that I'm not going to do that, but I think the allegations are a priority. I think I may actually make another video first, because I just need a little bit of a break from this universe, or else I will fall into a very bad headspace. So it probably won't be a super long deep dive. It'll probably be a much shorter video on like a TikToker or something to just kind of palate cleanse before I dive headfirst into the rabbit hole again and explore the allegations. So yeah, as always, you know, let me know your thoughts and opinions. If you try to tell me that Melanie's not a freak, I will tell you that you are, and I'll probably delete your comment because I'm done. You know, however, if you have other opinions about other things, like, you know, the correlations with the art and, you know, some of the deeper messages, or, you know, certain songs, or if you think, like, you know, when it came to the art stuff that, like, maybe I misinterpreted a certain thing, or I missed a certain thing, like, if you have actual opinions about those sort of things, those sort of details, that's one thing. But if you're just trying to minimize this and say she's not a predator and this is all purity culture and media literacy and all that, like, I'm done. I'm done with that. Go to some fucking Reddit snark and complain about me there, because I'm not platforming that anymore. This is so obviously not an aesthetic or any of that other stupid bullshit. It is not media illiteracy. It is not purity culture. It is fucking predatory and gross and disgusting. And if you are not convinced at this point, it's because you are a predator, and I am not going to platform that. Anyways, yeah. So with that, I hope you all have a lovely day or night, depending on where you are. And I will see you in the next video. Bye. Take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves right now. There's a lot going on in the world. Take care of yourselves.